The static in apartment 3B, you probably wouldn't remember the building. It was just another one of those quiet, aging, three-story apartment blocks on the edge of the city. Brown brick, a flickering exit sign in the hallway, and a broken intercom that buzzed every time it rained. But you'd remember the static. Everyone heard it eventually. Sarah moved into apartment 3B in late October. Rent was dirt cheap, and the landlord seemed eager to get someone in quickly. Too eager. She didn't ask questions she couldn't afford to. A waitress by day, insomniac by night, Sarah figured she'd finally have a space to herself to reset. It started the first night. A soft shh, K, like TV static, crept into her room around 3 a.m. She didn't have a television. It came from the wall behind her bed, the one shared with apartment 3A. She assumed the neighbor had fallen asleep with something on. But the static didn't stop. It never stopped. It would fade out and return hours later, sometimes louder, sometimes with voices. She knocked on the wall once. The static paused, then returned louder. A few days later, she asked the landlord if 3A had someone living in it. He blinked. Nope, hasn't been occupied in almost 2 years. Sarah's stomach turned. I hear sounds at night. Static, voices. He scratched his head and muttered, probably the wiring. That unit always had quirks. Then he walked away quickly, like he'd said too much. By the end of week 1, the voices in the static were clear. Not full sentences, just fragments, whispers, murmurs, and one word that came through again and again. Stay. It always came after 3 a.m. Sarah stopped sleeping. Bags formed under her eyes. Her waitress shifts suffered. She dropped trays, forgot orders. People began to notice the twitch in her left eye. She tried recording the sound, but when she played it back the next morning, there was nothing but silence, not even static. She called an electrician. He found nothing wrong. She called her mom. It's probably stress, her mother said. You need rest. But Sarah knew what she was hearing. One night, the sound didn't come through the wall. It came from inside her apartment. She stood in the kitchen, frozen. A soft static buzzed from behind the pantry door. She didn't move, didn't breathe. Then the door opened on its own. Nothing was there. She slammed it shut and didn't sleep at all that night. 2 weeks in, Sarah saw something. She caught it in her bathroom mirror just over her shoulder, a woman standing in the corner of her bedroom. Pale, featureless face. No eyes, no mouth, drenched in shadow. When she turned around, nothing was there. The next night, the woman was closer, and the static louder. Desperate, Sarah began researching apartment 3A. She found an old article buried in an online forum. A woman had lived there in 2018, alone. She complained about hearing the static at night. Neighbors said she started acting strange, whispering to herself, never leaving the building. Then, one morning, she was gone. Her apartment locked from the inside. No body, no note. The last line of the article stuck with Sarah. Tenants say the static stopped until the next one moved in. Sarah tried to leave. She packed a single bag and walked out. The building wouldn't let her go. The front door was chained shut. No matter how hard she pulled, it wouldn't budge. Her phone had no signal. She banged on neighbors' doors. No one answered. Then the lights went out, and the static returned louder than ever, coming from every wall. Sarah ran back to her apartment. She locked the door and cried, pressing her back against the wall, but it didn't help. The static bled through her skin, through her bones, through her mind. Then the whisper came, clear as a bell, right in her ear. It's your turn. In the hallway, apartment 3A's door creaked open, slowly, as if welcoming her. Sarah screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the hiss of the static. and then she walked in. The door shut behind her. The static stopped. The next morning, the landlord smiled when a new potential tenant came to tour 3B. "Quiet building," he said. "Rent's cheap. No one's in 3A, so you won't have any noisy neighbors." He jingled the keys, and from somewhere upstairs, very faintly, came the sound of static. Part 2 of the static in apartment 3B, titled Voices Behind the Wall. It picks up right after Sarah vanishes. Voices Behind the Wall, Part 2 of the static in apartment 3B a month passed. The new tenant, David, was in his mid-30s, software engineer, quiet, logical, skeptical by nature. He didn't believe in ghosts, urban legends, or anything without a verifiable source, which is why he ignored the note taped to the back of his kitchen cabinet. "If you hear the static, don't answer it." He assumed it was a joke, or worse, some deranged tenant's idea of fun. That was day 1. Day 2, around 3 a.m., he heard it. The soft shh, HKK, like a radio stuck between stations, leaking from the vent in the bathroom. He sat up in bed, confused. He hadn't turned anything on. He walked to the bathroom. The sound stopped. He looked up into the vent. Nothing. He went back to bed. But before sleep could take him, the static started again, this time from the other side of the wall, the one that connected to apartment 3A. By the end of the first week, David was losing sleep. He'd done everything. Foam earplugs, white noise machines, even blasting his phone at night with ambient sounds. Nothing drowned out that particular frequency of static. Then came the voices. Sometimes it was just breathing. Sometimes it was a woman whispering. Once, clear as day, she said, "Help me." David decided to investigate. He knocked on the door of 3A. No answer. He tried the handle. Locked. But as he turned to leave, he could swear he heard movement inside. Shuffling. Soft sobs. He pressed his ear to the door. "Hello?" he whispered. The static flared to life directly behind the door. Loud. Violent. He jumped back. And in that moment, he saw something strange under the door. No light, no shadows, just blackness. Total and complete. Like the apartment behind it didn't exist. David contacted the landlord. Someone has to be in there," he said. "I hear things every night." The landlord shook his head. "Empty. Has been. Trust me, you're not the first to say that. But it's all in your head. No one's in there." David leaned in. "What happened to the last tenant?" The landlord didn't answer, just said, "Some places don't like being alone." Later that night, David made a decision. He broke into 3A. It wasn't hard, just a little pressure near the lock with a screwdriver. The door creaked open, and a wave of cold air washed over him. The apartment was pristine, untouched, furniture still covered in plastic, air stale, walls humming faintly. He stepped inside and turned on his flashlight. Dust particles floated like snowflakes. And then he saw the writing on the wall. Literal writing scratched into the paint over and over in shaky, desperate strokes. "Stay, stay, stay." He turned and ran. But the door slammed shut before he could escape. Trapped. David pounded on the door. No use. Then the static returned. All around him. Wall. Ceiling. Floor. It was deafening. He turned and saw her. The faceless woman. Pale. No eyes. No mouth. No expression. Just there. Watching. Then she moved one twitch at a time closer. David backed away, heart hammering, but the room stretched unnaturally. No matter how far he moved, she was always closer. The lights burst, glass shattered, and then silence, darkness. Morning came. The door to apartment 3A hung open, empty. David was gone. So was his stuff. And on the cabinet in 3B, a new note had been taped up in frantic handwriting. If you hear the static, don't answer it. D. The landlord smiled. A new tenant would arrive next week. The cycle continues, but this time, something changes. The new tenant, part 3 of the static in apartment 3B. Her name was Lily. Fresh out of college, optimistic, chasing her first big city job. She didn't care that the apartment seemed too cheap for the location. Rent was rent. And besides, it wasn't like she believed in ghost stories. Even when the landlord mentioned that the unit had been vacant for a bit, she just smiled and signed the lease. The first night was silent. The second night, too. Lily felt lucky. Maybe the stories about apartment 3B were just rumors, scare tactics from online forums. Until night 3. 3:08 a.m. A soft shh, KK, like a whisper made of static, drifted from the bathroom vent. Then it moved, crawling along the walls, into the bedroom, under the bed. She sat up, heart pounding. Her phone buzzed. No caller ID. 3:09 a.m. Against her better judgment, she answered. Nothing, just static. And faintly, a voice. Stay. The next morning, she found a note taped to the back of her kitchen cabinet. If you hear the static, don't answer it. D. Her skin crawled. She Googled apartment 3B strange sounds, but the results were limited buried threads, half-deleted posts. People mentioning static, whispers, and vanishing tenants. The deeper she dug, the more one phrase came up. It doesn't let you leave. By the end of the week, the static was constant. Day and night. She unplugged every device, shut off the breaker. Still, it hissed from behind the walls. Sometimes it spoke, the woman's voice. Sometimes pleading, help me. Sometimes commanding, stay. And sometimes other voices, male, cold, it's your turn. But Lily wasn't like the others. She didn't just cower. She confronted it. The next time the static rose at 3 a.m., she followed it. She pressed her ear to the wall of apartment 3A, listened to the voices, and shouted, "What do you want?" Silence. Then a soft knock from the other side. 3 slow, deliberate taps. She backed away, but something inside her whispered, "Go in." So she did. She broke into 3A the same way David had. But the room was different this time. Colder. The walls pulsed, faintly alive beneath the cracked paint. Scratched messages covered every inch of space. Stay. Don't answer. Help. In the corner stood an old, dust-covered television, one she'd never seen before. It flicked on as she entered. The screen showed static, and within the static, faces. Flickering, distorted, familiar. Sarah, David, and others. Their mouths moved, but their eyes were hollow. She stepped closer, and they all whispered in unison, "Stay." But Lily didn't freeze. She grabbed the TV, yanked the cord from the wall, and threw it across the room. It shattered. The static stopped. For the first time, silence. But then the floor beneath her groaned. The walls cracked. And that faceless woman emerged from the shadows. Slowly, as if pulling herself from the cracks in reality. Her pale head tilted. And then, for the first time, a mouth formed. A jagged smile, stretched impossibly wide. "Stay." Lily turned and ran. The apartment door wouldn't budge. The static surged, louder than before, filling her ears, drowning her thoughts. She screamed. The last thing she saw before blacking out was the faceless woman crawling toward her, mouth unhinging, swallowing the static whole. Morning. Lily woke on the floor of 3B, alive. But when she stood, she noticed something new. The static was gone. The walls were still. But in the bathroom mirror, behind her reflection, the faceless woman stood, smiling. Lily moved out that day. But when the landlord came to inspect, he smiled, satisfied. A new tenant would arrive in a week, and this time there were 2 notes taped behind the cabinet. If you hear the static, don't answer it. S, if you hear the static, don't answer it. Dear, and scratched faintly beneath, it never stops. L, L.